So definition part is very important for the undergraduate point of view. For you, the definition is very important because the first thing when you are facing any examiner, the first thing you will be asked the definition of any disease or any disorder or any term which is a medical term. You know better than me from your first year experience that definition is very important, and pathology is all about definition. So definition is cell injury is the first definition of the pathology chapter. Pathology is a very big topic, very big topic means not topic, very big subject, and it was first taught in 2 years. Now this time has been reduced to 9 months. So it's very tough for you. I think it's very tough for you to handle this whole subject. It's a very tough and mother subject within a few months. So read properly from a textbook. I think Madam or Rajushida have told you which textbook you have to follow. For my opinion, if you know what is my opinion to consider a textbook for you, it should be Hirschmohan. It should be Hirschmohan for you. Of course, you may consult Robbins. For some topics, have to read from Robbins directly because these are very important topics and very gist are there in new editions of Robbins. So those topics you have to consult from Robbins, but mostly you have to consult the Hirschmohan portion. Anyway, let's start our class today. So first thing is the cell injury. So what is cell injury? Whenever any cell in our body faces any kind of imbalance between internal and external environment, the cell undergoes some kind of changes. That changes is due to the imbalance between the external and internal and external environment. So usually the body is present in a very status quo motion. It is known as homeostasis. So any external stimuli, if impairs that kind of homeostasis, that causes the cell injury. You got my point? Any kind of deviation from homeostasis can introduce cell injury. So if any imbalance is there, what do you do? তোমাদের রুমে তুমি বা কোনো জায়গায় যখন বাইরের কোনো পরিবেশ খারাপ আছে, তোমরা কি করবে? ন্যাচারাল রেসপন্স কি হবে? You will fight. Of course you will fight. You will try to sustain that changed environment, try to sustain yourself in that changed environment, isn't? So same thing is occurring in case of the cell. Initially they will try to adapt themselves with the sustained injury, the change of homeostasis, that is known as external stimuli. So whenever there is any external stimuli, the body tries to imbibe that stimuli. They try to adapt themselves to life in that changed environment. That stimuli should be at a particular limit. If that limit has been crossed, the cell will be injured. So initially what happened? There will be normal homeostasis, then some kind of stresses is there over the normal cell, and that cell undergo initially some kind of physiological change and up to a certain level of pathological change. That changes within the cell are known as adaptation, cellular adaptation. What are the types of adaptation you have known? You have read what are the types of adaptations? Can you name some types of cellular adaptations from last classes? Yes, hyperplasia, that means there will be increase in number of cell. Then hypertrophy, that means there will be increase in size of the cell. Then if the stimulus is dangerous, they are causing the decreased number of the cell, or there is decrease in the size of the cell. This is known as atrophy. If the stimulus is as such that the cell is changed from one differentiated type to another differentiated type, then this is known as metaplasia. And if the cellular change is actually causing some damage to the DNA or chromatin or any genetic material, that causes the change in the normal character of the cell. The cell might be dangerous for the body in near future. That means the cellular character has been changed. They might go into a phase of neoplasia. That term neoplasia you will be taught in the later portion of your syllabus, neoplasia. So initiation of neoplasia will be some kind of genetic material change that causes the change of the normal character of the cell. That is known as dysplasia. So all this atrophy, hypertrophy, dysplasia, hyperplasia, etc., these are the example of cellular change, cellular adaptations. Cellular adaptations তখনই হয় যখন that kind of cell, that kind of stress is within a certain limit. Now suppose this injurious stimuli again exceeds that certain limit, and that injurious stimuli is within a very few hours or minutes or very transient phase, that persists for a very transient phase. That causes a type of cell injury which is as such that from that injured condition the cell can revive back in its normal physiological condition. So that kind of cellular changes are known as reversible cell injury. Those pathological changes of the cell which are intricated by the transient stimuli which is implied from the external environment can be reversed back subsidiary to its normal condition, normal physiological condition. That kind of cell injury is known as reversible cell injury. But now if the stress limits is high and it is very severe, very progressive type, it is crossing that boundary, the cell cannot adapt itself, and it is very severe type of cell, and those pathological changes within the cells are in extreme level, at that kind of level that the cell cannot revive back its normal physiological condition. So these morphological changes within the cell due to severe and progressive injury progressive stimuli is known as irreversible cell injury. And two prime example of irreversible cell injury is necrosis and apoptosis. So whenever there is any stress, if the stress is within a condition, within a certain limit, the body tries to adapt it by some cellular mechanism. Those cellular mechanisms combinedly known as adaptation. If the cell injury is transient, if the stimuli is transient and within a certain limit, it's a very notorious cell injury, notorious stimuli, but it is within a certain limit, the cell will revive back from its injured part to normal physiological condition, that is known as reversible cell injury. And if the stimuli is very severe, obnoxious, very progressive type, and It compels the cell to death. It is known as irreversible cell injury. Two prime examples of irreversible cell injury is necrosis and apoptosis. So with this background, just read this definition. Cell injury is defined as a variety of stresses a cell encounters as a result of changes in its internal and external environment. Quite obvious. So this kind of any stress which is implicated within the cell can be short period of time, can be long period of time, can be a sustainable level, can be a obnoxious, very high, very notorious for the cell. Okay. So that extent and type of cell injury, that extent of type of stimuli that is implicated in the cell, that is one factor which is responsible, which kind of changes is occurring within the cell. And the second point is the type of the cell and in tissue which are affected. Those types and tissues involved are important factor for determination of which type of cellular adaptation or cell injury or which type of cell injury is going to occur. These two factors are very important for cell injury. So what are the etiologies? Etiologies for the cell injury, what are the causes of the cell injury? That might be genetic cause or that might be acquired cause. Genetic cause might be developmental, that means there might be some issues related to the morphogenesis. Second point could be some cytogenetic change. Cytogenetic change means there might be some chromosomal abnormalities. Third point could be any gene related single gene change. Those are included within the Mendelian disorders, And fourth point are very important is multigenic. There is so many genetic factors are introduced to be a factor to be causing a cell injury. Now, other acquired causes. Acquired causes are more important than the genetic causes per se. In general, acquired causes are very important factors to cause the cell injury. Most important cause of cell injury is hypoxia. Most important cause of cell injury is known as hypoxia. That means lacking of blood supply. So whenever the body is facing, any tissue is facing the lack of blood supply, that means the oxygen supply to the body is low. Okay. That oxygen supply is known as hypoxia and lack of blood supply is known as ischemia. So lack of blood supply, ischemia causing decrease in oxygen supply known as hypoxia, and it is the most common form of cell injury, most common cause of cell injury. Okay. Other than that, what are the causes? That might be some physical agents like heat, cold, etc. Some chemical agents, drugs, obvious. Third, microbial agents like virus, bacteria, etc. Next, some immunological agents like immunity portion. We will deal these conditions in immunity portion. I am not going to talk much things about immunological agents. Some nutritional derangements like lack of nutrition, any protein energy malnutritions or lack of vitamins, etc. or micronutrients. Aging, psychological factors. Iatrogenic, that is caused due to any surgical interventions, or idiopathic, we don't know why the cell is injured. So these are included within the acquired causes. Okay. So what are the influences of our external stimuli? Of course, first cellular adaptations, then reversible cell injury, and then irreversible cell injury and dying. What are the cellular adaptations? Hyperplasia, hypertrophy, atrophy, metaplasia and dysplasia. Okay. So we will dealing now the irreversible cell injury. That means the cell death is very evident here. the cell is going to die. They cannot sustain that progressive and very high obnoxious stimuli which is implicated within the cell. Okay. So what are the conditions? What are the changes? What are the changes occurring within the cell? There might be initially there might be autolysis. That means the cell is lysed. Cell is lysed by whom? By itself. The body itself causing the damage of this cell. Autolysis. Next is necrosis and apoptosis. Two prime example is necrosis and apoptosis. And after the cell death, what the body is doing with the dead cell, there might be some pathological calcification over the dead cells, or there might be some conditions which is known as gangrene. We will talking later. We will talking it later. So this is very important for your, now the question starts, what is the mechanism of cell injury, irreversible cell injury? It's on 5 marks, short note. What is the mechanism of cell injury? 4 most important points as a mechanism is, one is depletion of ATP content in the body. Depletion of ATP content in the body. Second, actually that causes mitochondrial injury. Mitochondrial injury or mitochondrial damage. Second point is, within the cell there will be increased influx of calcium causing within the cell, that is accumulation of intracellular calcium, and that accumulation of intracellular calcium causing calcium homeostasis imbalance. Calcium homeostasis and imbalance. It has a very dangerous effect upon the cell. Third point is very important, production of reactive oxygen species or reactive oxygen free radicals, that is known as free radicals, which have very notorious effect over the cells. And fourth is, that is known as oxygen derived free radicals, accumulation of the oxygen derived free radicals. And fourth is defect in cellular membrane and DNA. These 4 points are very important mechanism of cell injury. Now coming one by one. First is depletion of the ATP. So initially in my first portion of the lecture I have told you that the ischemia is the most common cause of cell injury. Most common cause. So decrease in the blood supply means there will be decrease in the oxygen supply in the body, within the cell, and decrease in the oxygen supply means there will be decrease in the oxidative phosphorylation. Naturally the body cell is lacking the oxygen, so decrease in the oxidative phosphorylation. So as a result, as a consequence of that, there will be decrease in the ATP. Okay. ATP has the most important function within the cell is that it causes the generation of sodium potassium pump. So if there is decrease in the ATP, the sodium potassium pump cannot be working out, They cannot causing the efflux of the sodium out of the cell and influx of the potassium. So there will be ultimately this pump failure, sodium potassium pump failure, That means there will be accumulation of more water and sodium within the cell as well as calcium within the cell. These are cations, so they will imbibe more amount of water within the cell. So ultimately there will be accumulation of the water within the cell. So cellular extra hydration, overhydration of the cells is ultimate effect that causes some pathological changes known as blebbing formation. That means the cell is swelled up and there are some blebs formation within the cellular membrane. Like suppose this is a cell, okay, and from these 3 points some blebs are formed, like some sac-like protrusions are going outside from the cells. They are filled up with some overhydrated materials, swelled up endoplasmic reticulum. These are known as blebs. The endoplasmic reticulum becomes swelled up and there will be some protrusions of cell membrane from the surface of the cell. It is the first change, and it is very reversible type, reversible change. It's very reversible change. If the ischemia phases out, then if the oxidative phosphorylation again starts occurring, if the accumulation of the water is negativated, that is the sodium, the normal functioning of the sodium potassium pump is again working, then these blebs will disappear. Ultimately they will disappear. So this is very reversible kind of change. Second change is there will be some decrease in the ATP. That means oxidative, that means anaerobic glycolysis will be there. Aerobic glycolysis will be diminished, and in place of aerobic glycolysis there will be some kind of anaerobic kind of glycolysis. That means within the cell there will be accumulation of lactic acid. Lactic acid accumulation means there will be decrease in pH, and whenever the pH is decreased, that means there will be some kind of negative activity in homeostasis. What are the negative activity of decrease in pH? Decrease in pH causing the clumping of chromatin. Decrease in pH, that is the cellular acidity causing the clumping of chromatin. And second very important thing is it also causes lipid peroxidation. For the lipid peroxidation, 2 important cellular changes should be there. One is decrease in pH, that is acidic pH, and second is production of reactive oxygen species or known as free radicals, oxygen derived free radicals. So whenever there will be decrease in pH, there will be some kind of clumping of chromatin. And third point is detachment of ribosomes. Detachment of ribosomes. Due to decrease in ATP, there will be detachment of ribosomes. That means the protein synthesis will not be there within the cells. So as a consequence of ischemia, there will be bleb formations, chromatin clumping, and decreased synthesis of protein due to detachment of ribosome. Second point is the mitochondrial damage. It's very obvious that due to the ischemia or other causes of cell injury like toxin or radiation injury, this radiation, toxin, any kind of stimuli, extreme obnoxious stimuli, they causes the mitochondrial dysfunctions. How? Because they causes the decrease in ATP generation, and due to this extra oxygen supply or disbalance in the oxygen supply or radiation effect or any kind of toxins, they produces these things. First see these things. They are known as oxygen derived free radicals. I think in biochemistry you have taught this oxygen derived free radicals known as, that is, reactive oxygen species. What are the reactive oxygen species? Superoxide ion. They are converted into the hydrogen peroxide by superoxide dismutage, and halide system, that is HOCl, hypochlorous acid and halide system. They altogether causes, first thing is lipid peroxidation. Lipid peroxidation means what is the effect of, ultimate effect of lipid peroxidation? The bilipid layer of any kind of cell membrane will be damaged. Ultimate effect will be the damage of the cell membrane. So cell membrane, the permeability of the cell membrane will be lost. So due to the effect of the production of reactive oxygen species, there will be some kind of lipid peroxidation which causes ultimately the damage of the mitochondria, damage of the membrane. Second effect of reactive oxygen species causes decrease protein synthesis plus damage of protein. That is, the protein gets misfolded, and that misfolded proteins and fragmented proteins have a very bad effect over the cell. Why? Because there is something known as apoptosis. They actually initiates the phases of apoptosis. They acts as an initiator of apoptosis. They are causing the stimuli to initiate the apoptosis. So as a effect of protein modification and breaking down of proteins and disfolded proteins secondary to the lipid peroxidation and DNA damage, the cellular DNA content, chromatin content will be damaged ultimately, and the cell go into phase of apoptosis. And third effect of reactive oxygen species, again same condition, they can cause direct damage to the DNA. That means they cause the single gene mutation. And of course, if that mutation is as such that the cell DNA repair mechanism is able to maintain the normal integrity of the DNA as before, then cell will revive back. If that mutation is very high amount, that is the DNA that is DNA mechanism, DNA operating mechanism cannot act over it, the cell inclines to die. These three causes ultimately leads to the cell to death, either by process of necrosis or process of what? Apoptosis. So this is the third effect, that is reactive oxygen species production and its subsequent effect. So second effect obviously should be damage to the mitochondria. Mitochondrial damage either causes reactive oxygen species production, free radical production, and DNA decrease in the ATP generation. So it's a very multiple genetic abnormality, multiple cellular abnormalities which can cause to death of the cell by process of necrosis. Or there are another process of irreversible cell death known as apoptosis, because কি বললাম যে free radicals either produces some kind of disfolded proteins, misfolded, that is misfolded proteins, or mutated DNA. This misfolded proteins or mutated DNA initiates the process of apoptosis known as they increases some pro-apoptotic factor within the cells, and there will be decrease in the anti-apoptotic factor. That means this balance of apoptotic factors, pro-apoptotic that is those factors which are against the apoptosis, and the anti-apoptotic which are, sorry, pro-apoptotic, that is those factors which are for the apoptosis, and anti-apoptotic which are against the apoptosis, that balance has been lost. So the cell go into the phases of apoptosis. So ultimately there should be an mitochondrial damage. That is why the mitochondria is known as the site of cell injury, where if the mitochondria is injured, the cell is go into an irreversible type of cell injury. So it is the most important organelle which is injured in any kind of irreversible cell injury. And third point, this is fourth point basically, is in disbalance of the calcium homeostasis within the body. How it is occurring? Any obnoxious stimuli that causing the extracellular calcium to enter into the within the cell. Why? Because as you know that any kind of injury causing this permeability of the cellular membrane loss. কেন হচ্ছে লিপিড পারঅক্সিডেশন হচ্ছে বা any injury তে কি হচ্ছে cellular membrane এর loss হচ্ছে, the permeability of the cell membrane has been lost. That means there will be accumulation of the extracellular calcium within the cell known as accumulation of intracellular calcium. So this accumulation of intracellular calcium causing hell lot of activation of different kind of enzymes, like there will be activation of phospholipase causing the breakdown of phospholipids. Phospholipids is a component of what? Cell membrane. So there will be ultimately cell membrane damage. Next, it causes the activation of the proteases. That means there will be degradation of proteins. Protein is of course and again in membrane structural component of cell membrane. So there will be ultimately cell membrane damage. Third, there will be activation of endonucleases. Endonucleases causing the damage to the DNA. So again chromatin damage. Or lipases causing the, that is they causes the breakdown of fatty acid into, that is triglyceride into fatty acid and glycerol. This free fatty acid has a very bad effect over the cell that is within the body. And so on, like ATPase causing the decrease in the ATP content, they causing the breakdown of the ATP. So many cellular enzymes gets activated, and ultimate effect will be cellular membrane damage or nuclear damage, or that is cellular membrane damage or nuclear damage. So ultimate effect of all these four mechanisms are basically damage to the cell membrane and damage to the nuclear, that is within the nuclear content, that is DNA content or genetic content. Okay. So basically we are talking about the prime type of irreversible cell injury. One is necrosis and one is apoptosis. So mechanism of cell injury clear হয়েছে না? There are four mechanisms basically. One is mitochondrial damage. This is the most important cause, most important organelle which has to be injured to cause any kind of cell death. Why it is occurring? Because there will be some kind of depletion of the ATP. Third is the normal homeostasis of the calcium within the body has been lost, because there will be more accumulation of the intracellular cytoplasmic calcium. And fourth point is very important, is there will be production of free oxygen species, reactive oxygen species, free radicals. They causing the lipid peroxidation or misfolding of the proteins or DNA damage. So ultimate effect will be the damage to the cellular membrane, damage to the nuclear content. There are two forms of irreversible injury. First is necrosis. What is the definition? Necrosis is defined as a localized area of death of tissue followed by degradation of tissue by hydrolytic enzymes liberated from the dead cells. So definition ki bolche, it's a death of a group of cell within a tissue. It's a death of a group of cell within a tissue followed by degradation of those cells by liberation of hydrolytic enzymes which are present within the dead cells. It's a death of a group of cells followed by প্রথমে কি হচ্ছে death হচ্ছে followed by degradation of dead cells. কার দ্বারা degradation হচ্ছে? Who are degrading the dead cells? That enzymes, hydrolytic enzymes, which were present within the cells, now they are liberated from the cells. Why they are liberated? Because the cell membrane is damaged, and within the cell membrane, cytoplasm এর মধ্যেই তোমার enzymes গুলো ছিল. Now they have been activated and they are liberated. তো তারা তাদের কাজ দেখাবে, তাদের জলবা দেখাবে, কি করবে? ড্যামেজ সেলগুলোকে ডিগ্রেড করবে, রিমুভ করবে, try to remove, they are trying to remove that degraded cells, degraded organelles. ঠিক আছে? তো বেসিক কনসেপ্ট হচ্ছে the necrosis is defined as a localized area of death of a tissue followed by degradation of tissue by hydrolytic enzymes liberated from the dead cells. স্যার চলে এসেছেন না? So আজ তো কিছু করার নেই, it's a very important topic, necrosis and apoptosis.